Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Christina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Christina Schmidt. It is almost week 3 of Advent, which means we're getting close to the end of 2024. So very exciting. Just as an update, I'm going to take a little bit of time off to spend with my family. We like to travel to Michigan. So it's just easier to not put any episodes out while the kids are home from school because they don't like to stay away from the camera. But with that being said, I just want to say that this has been a fantastic year. I've really picked up the podcasting, tried to keep it regular, and tried to really give you guys some practical tools. So I would absolutely love it if you could continue to share this message with others. I love talking to you guys. I love telling you and sharing all of this with you. And I want to keep sharing it with more. So I would love it if you could share it with a friend. And in fact, I have a huge, maybe Christmas present to me that you could do. But if you could pass this episode or any of your other favorite episodes or most of them to somebody that you know. I am super close to hitting another milestone in my podcast downloads. So if every listener who's currently listening now could share it with 1 or even 2 people, I would definitely hit that milestone. So I am going to ask this of you all in a much appreciated fashion. Just share it with a friend, ask them to download and have a listen, whether it be this episode or maybe another episode. My last episode was only 15 minutes long, so feel free to make it that one. But with that being said, I want to jump into today's episode because I'm super excited about it. I feel like I mention the working genius in pretty much almost every single episode, and that's because I can just see, I know how powerful it is. It's so good and it's so easy, and it gives a language to things that we may not have had a language for before, that may have felt like we were insulting someone's personality. But when we can have a simple, practical way to talk about it, which the working genius does give us, as well as all the productivity improvements that it gives us, it makes it easier. It makes it easier to have these conversations. It makes it easier to build trust, easier to have and show empathy, and just easier to build these strong relationships that are so important for us to be successful. So I wanted to take today and just put it all in one episode for you so that you can really listen to it and say, oh my gosh, there's a reason she talks about it all the time. And you can share this easily with a friend, with somebody, like maybe you've taken the assessment and you said, this is really good. Here, listen to this one. Here are some other super awesome, amazing things that you can do with the working genius, and just have it all in one compact, hopefully, episode. I do tend to talk a lot about working genius, so we'll see how long this episode ends up. But before I get into kind of the whys, I will give you a brief overview of the model, just so that everybody's on the same page. We understand what it is, what the geniuses are, and how it all comes together. So basically, the 6 types of working genius is a model that was created by Patrick Lencioni and his team at the Table Group. It's only a few years old, but it has done so much for just productivity, for openness, for conversations in just the 3 years that it's been around. And I have found it just life-changing, guilt relieving, and productivity improving just in myself. So it's amazing for that. It is set up with the way that work is done. So if you think of work in 3 main stages, your first one being the ideation stage. So, okay, we come up with an idea or we create the thing, right? And the last one being implementation. So we get it out there to the world. The one stage that a lot of people don't think about is this activation stage. And this is one of the biggest outcomes of this model, is that almost a realization that there is a middle stage. because there's a lot of places and a lot of teams that they jump from creating the idea to trying to implement it out there. But what they forget is that nuance of, getting the exact right idea and then getting people on board. So this is the activation stage. So there's the 3 stages, and within each of these 3 stages, we have 2 geniuses. And to not get too deep into it, there are 3 geniuses. One is forget the words every single time. One is the genius that's going to push everybody else, and the other is the responsive genius. So the disruptive and the responsive geniuses. Why I cannot remember those words, I do not know, but I cannot ever remember them. So you have these playing off of each other, which give that energy level of let's go, but let's make sure we're getting everything ready together. So if you can hear a lot of noise in the background right now, I have a giant turtle tank and my pet turtle that is trying to climb up onto his little platform. So apologies if you're hearing all this scratching noises. But back to the model. The 6 stages are 2 in each stage of work. So the 6 geniuses are. So I'm going to go through the geniuses and kind of what they are, and then I'm going to go a little bit more in depth to what they look like as in people, right? So the first stage is wonder. So this is where you'll ask a question like, why is the wall green? Or why do we do it this way? Or is there a different way? So just asking a random question, which sometimes might not feel like a genius to people who have this genius. It's just something that they do. They just have questions and they ponder, and they really enjoy pontificating on things and sitting there and just being. But for people who don't come up with these questions very well, they're huge. They're huge to make sure you're even answering the right question when you come up with your solution. So very, very important when looking at strategy, when looking and creating a new route for your business, when creating even just, looking at something you do every single year and saying, is this still the right thing? Because so many of us, we get in this thing, I do this every single year. We do these, and these things for Christmas without anybody having any wonder or asking, is this still the right thing? Does this still make sense? You go on with these things that aren't creating value, that aren't fulfilling people anymore because things have changed. The world has changed. The people have changed. The, wants and needs, ideas have changed in the people that are doing it. So maybe it's not the right thing anymore. So anyway, very, very critical thing. The second stage is invention. So this could be answering the question that the wanderer has asked, but it's ultimately just creating the idea, inventing something. And the key is inventing something from nothing. So basically, people with this genius will invent whether you want them to or not. They'll answer a question that is not even being asked because their mind just filled it up. This is the typical one that most people will think of as a genius. And, they come up with a lot of great ideas. So it feels very genius-like. But again, they might try to reinvent the wheel when it's not necessary, when it's not needed, and when it actually can be a disruption. So that's the first ideation stage. Wonder is the responsive, so the slower genius, and they're responding to the environment. And invention is the disruptive genius. It's the disruptive genius. So they could be disruptive to a team that's already on implementation, right? Okay, so the next phase, after we've invented something, we need to discern. So this is the discernment phase. So this is that actual coming down to this is the right choice. So what that might look like in real time is a going back and forth between idea and some modifications, or like, hey, go back to the drawing board. That's not going to work. And what it really is that people with that genius of discernment, they're really good at noticing patterns that they might not even realize they're noticing. And it would be what we would normally call like a really good gut. So it's like, no, that's not going to work. I have no idea why, but it's not going to work. It's like something feels wrong. So just go do something, right? Go change it, go modify. They may be able to say what to modify. I have this genius. So I find myself like I add on top. I'm like, oh, but do this and it would be way better. So it can sometimes feel confusing, like you might actually have invention because you love that brainstorming ideation. But what I always say is like you probably like ideation with someone else or like with a starting point. Whereas inventors don't want the starting point. Like for me, I don't create recipes from nothing, but I can look at a picture and like the kind of guidance, some ideas from the recipe, and I'd love to make it just better or different or do something from it. So that's kind of like starting with a base idea. And I also love sitting there and brainstorming with people. It's like we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Like it's fun. And it feels like invention because in some ways it is, but it's a modification more than a straight up invention. So this is the responsive genius again. So it could be slow because they're responding to the invention or the idea. The next one is galvanizing. This is getting everybody on board, kind of rolling out the idea and getting people excited about it and wanting to jump on board, feeling almost compelled to jump on board. And so people with this genius, this is again the disruptive genius. If you say, here's the idea, get it done, they're going to push. They're going to push everybody else. They're going to be disruptive, right? The disruptive genius. And really what they are doing, like what's actually happening is they can see and sense somehow, again, this is the genius part of it. They can sense what someone needs to feel excited about it. So they've got almost a great read on people. I feel like you probably see a lot of salespeople with this because they don't mind pushing. Like for me, galvanizing isn't a competency for me, so I can get people excited. A lot of people will actually say, oh, galvanizing must be in yours. But it's not a genius for me because if I do it once, I'm good. I don't want to do it again because I've already told you once, you should just go do it. But galvanizers don't mind and actually enjoy following up and said, hey, did you do that again? Did you do that thing? And oh, let's go do the thing now because you didn't do it yet. And so I'm going to make sure you go and do it. So a little bit of differentiation there. Like you might be good at doing it the first time if you don't have it in your geniuses, but you're maybe not going to want to follow up. All right, so now that's that activation stage. So again, the first one is the responsive, then the next one is the disruptive, which will then move it to the next stage if done well. And so that last stage is the implementation stage. It starts with the genius of enablement, again, a responsive genius. So if you think of how the flow is going, you've got a galvanizer, and then the first genius right thereafter is this person who really wants to help no matter what. They may not have time for it. They may not have the skill set for it, but I'll help. Yes, just point me in the right direction, tell me what to do, and I'll go do it. So this is a genius because when you think about teamwork, when you think about what kind of brings everybody together, this genius can be the glue. This genius gets other people saying, oh, I guess, yeah, okay, I can help. Yeah, and they kind of bring everyone together instead of working in their own individual silos, thinking, if I own it, I must therefore do it. They help us to see that it's a team effort, that, okay, well, I might own the action, but you're going to help me achieve it. It's like the assist, like the assist is important. That's why they write it down too, right, in sports. So that's that enablement genius. It's then kind of getting people excited, but they're responding to the galvanizing. And then the last genius is the genius of tenacity. So these people want to check it off the list. I know many of us enjoy doing that little check mark. I have tenacity in my frustrations, but I still love crossing things off my list. And I will literally write it down just so I can cross it out. So it's not just that, but it's that you see something unfinished and you cannot help yourself from trying to make it done because that's that motivator. That's like, oh, it's like, I'm assuming because I don't feel it. I'm assuming that it's almost like bothersome for them to see it hanging out there, not done. Actually, I sometimes do that to this is mean, but I kind of made a joke the other day. I was shoveling my walk and my neighbor was walking by and he did me a favor during my certification and I did his working genius. And I said, okay, so he has tenacity in his geniuses. So I said, and I left like one strip undone. And I said, oh, I'm done. It's good enough, right? And he was like, so I was like, just kidding. I just knew it would bother you. So maybe not a very nice thing to do, but made me chuckle. It didn't cause him a lot of heartburn there, but it's bothersome to them to see it unfinished, basically, is what I'm trying to say, to the point that they might grab it from someone else to finish it if it wasn't done in the time frame that they expected it to be done. So that is that disruptive genius. It's very important because there are a lot of people with tenacity and their frustration that need people around them to grab things from them. And they also need the galvanizers around them to push them to finish the thing, right? So if you can notice, we need all six. We need all six to make things function properly. And that's why when you look at the image of it, the model, it's in gears, because if you take a gear out, it's not going to roll, right? Like the system will not function well. I don't know if it'll function at all, technically, the gear's out, but it won't function well. And that's to give us that visual impact of how critical each piece of that puzzle is and each genius is to have on our teams. And this is, again, work teams and home teams, because we have teams at home. This is the village, right? It takes a village. Whether you're running a business, it takes a village, or you're running a home, it takes a village. So your other geniuses and your people around you, these are your villages. These are completing your system or your circuit, or however you want to look at it. It's necessary. And I love it because it's so natural. These are our God-given gifts. And it's basically, we are meant to function as this whole body. And basically the science behind this is proving the fact that we were designed to live in community with others. So love that part. A little add-on there that I love. All right. So as you can see, as everything is connected, there are huge productivity benefits. That's why we say there's this 80% productivity tool, 20% assessment, or like personal assessment, because it will help us design things more productively. So to illustrate what I mean by that, when we all function in our geniuses, we are operating at top-notch, full capacity. We are doing the things we were designed to do. It's almost like using the proper tool for the job. I'm going to tell you a little story because it's the Christmas season. All right, so we went and got our tree. We always get a real tree. And you know how you have to cut the end off, especially when you get them from lots, because sometimes they cover them with wax. And if you don't do it, as I learned from history, from personal experience, if you don't cut the end off, the tree can't get water in. So you got to cut the end off. So I use a saw once a year when I have to cut the little stump off the end of my tree. Last year, I was finally frustrated with it because it was so dull, it wouldn't work. I just got rid of it. And I forgot that until this year. And so I went digging through all of our things and I found a jigsaw. It's like literally those ones that have the big, like super thin blade. And it is literally doing the opposite of what I wanted it to do. Not only is it meant for creating very curved shapes when you're sawing things, and I was trying to get a straighter cut, it was a dull blade, and I'm not very good at using a saw. So, yep, it wasn't working well. Wrong tool for the job. So I asked one neighbor, and I got this other one. It's quite a rusty blade. I didn't do much better with that one. And then finally, I got a reciprocating saw, which I would say still is not the right tool for the job because I didn't have all the other right tools. The tree was jerking all over. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am an accident waiting to happen right now. I'm going to bounce this thing off the concrete. It's going to hit me in the face. Thankfully, as you can see, there are no marks on my face. That did not happen. But 3 saws, probably an hour of trying to cut this thing later, it was not the right tool. And I was probably not the right human tool to be doing it. Right? So that's just an example of using the wrong tool for the job. And you can get it done. You're still going to get it done. My tree is a little bit crooked because the bottom's not exactly straight, but you know what? I got the job done and it's finished. But it was inefficient and the outcome is a little crooked. So not really the best way. And when we think about running our organizations and our businesses and our teams, when we're trying to run things where everybody's kind of sort of capable, we're not going to maybe get the best outcome. And if I think about how frustrating it was for me, like it was funny to some extent because it was, not a hugely important thing. But if I was trying to function in trying to use the wrong tool for the job all day long, even whether it be my mental toolbox or personality or an actual tool, I'm going to get very frustrated. And in fact, that's actually one of the key things. If you're looking at like Gallup surveys, they actually say, I have the proper tools to do my job. That is just another way of saying, like, hey, don't frustrate people with having the wrong tools. So that is one of those key things for engagement, which if you take that another way, you can say, hey, this is personality tools as well as actual tools for the job. I digress. So when we think about the productivity of it, if we can align the work that's in our team, because work will flow from one person to the next, and if we can align it so that everybody is, for the most part, using their geniuses, or if they're not, they're being activated by maybe a side-by-side genius that might push them a little bit more, then we are going to get better results and be more productive and have a happier, more engaged team. So this is that first level of this assessment that I love. I think it's amazing. And I think that everybody needs to do it, right? Everybody needs to just start doing it, even just use it at home, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is eye-opening as to how much benefit there is. So that's step one. I'm going to go through 4 different things. It's not my usual 3 because I like to do the 3s. So I'm going to do 4 different things that this will also help you with. So the first one is self-awareness. If you've heard me speak before about my cornerstone framework or really anything else, the biggest thing, that the most important thing for a leader to be is self-aware. And this tool, that 20% personality assessment, is so eye-opening in terms of self-awareness. Like it can take years and years and years to understand, what drives you, what should you be doing, where is God calling you to work or to be. And this is just a very quick assessment to get you almost a leap forward down that path. It's not going to replace reflection, and it's not going to replace prayer, and it's not going to replace experience necessarily, but it can give you just this flying leap down a path and save you some frustration and just open your eyes to something that you may not have accepted before because you had a belief that this is what you should be doing. So as a leader, I believed that I had to run every single meeting and I had to have all the answers and I had to create the ideas. And so I had these beliefs. But when I took this assessment, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not gifted with this. And understanding how the assessment and how the model works together is just a relief to say, I don't need to do these things. And in fact, I shouldn't be doing these things. I should not be spending the bulk of my time hanging out in my competencies and frustrations. I need to be spending the bulk of my time in my geniuses because that is where God placed me to be. That is where He wants me to live. That's what He wants me to be doing. That's where I'm going to be doing His work. That's where I'm going to be the most productive. That's where I'm going to find joy and energy and just want to go there. So that sense of relief that you can get, that guilt relief, as well as just that, hey, delegate this thing. Like this identification of what we should be delegating is giant. It's just huge. So when you can use this for a level of self-awareness that will give you a leap forward or a realization, maybe an eye-opening to something you were not aware of before, the benefits of that are just immeasurable, I will say. So that's number 1. Number 2, hiring and team alignment. I did do an entire podcast episode about this. And if you want to have a listen to that, I have a free tool. I've taken it off my website. So if you would like it, I can get it back up there. But this is huge. So many times when we have a team in place, we've got their jobs and their roles. Everybody does these things. You were hired to be the admin assistant, and that is what you are doing. I would say that there's a lot of times admin assistant leaves, then we hire another admin assistant. We don't look at the overall needs of the team and say, okay, what does that person, what do we need another body? Sometimes we overthink we don't need another body, but do we need to add? And then really, more importantly, what skill sets do we need to add? Which geniuses are we missing? And is there anybody operating in an area where they shouldn't be? So every time you have like a change in your team, so whether it's somebody leaves and you need to replace that someone, or you're growing and you're saying, I need something else. So whether it's that, any kind of changes, or even, obviously when you have your team now, you can rejig out, but that ability to assess, okay, what work is being done. I'm going to say that there are a lot of teams that do this already, but they're not necessarily doing it in the aim of geniuses. So when we look at really trying to shift how our team works and really trying to kind of have like a definite change and improvement, we want to make sure that, again, we're realigning our geniuses with the tasks that we're doing. So when you can look at, okay, this is the overall things that need doing in our team, and actually let's do this shift, and then we end up with maybe a role that is named something else, or it looks a little bit different than what it used to look, but we have a better role and we have a better idea of who should be in that role and which geniuses should be present. And we can also look at our team map, and say, well, actually, we are seriously lacking in galvanizing. The next hire we should have needs to have that genius. Even if they're the admin assistant, we're going to give them the job of galvanizing all of us. So it's thinking outside the box, because there's probably a lot of admin assistants that are like, oh my gosh, just do the thing, right? And if they have that genius of galvanizing, they may be able to assist the whole team with it. So that is that huge benefit. And I'm going to say hiring or team alignment benefit that you can grab from this model. The third thing I want to talk about is development. So development is a key thing that leaders need to do, not only for developing themselves, but for developing their team members. So a lot of times people will think of development as, okay, how do you want to get to the next level? How do you want to get that promotion? So I don't know how many year-end reviews I've done, or midterm reviews, whatever reviews I've done back when I was a leader, and just talked about them with my clients now, that people are like, well, I don't want to move up. I'm perfectly happy where I am, so I don't need a development. It's like, well, yes, you do. Because when we're not enhancing our skills, when we're not getting better, we're actually getting worse, because things change around us. We might get stale or bored with it, particularly if it's outside of our geniuses. But everybody has room for development. It just might look different if somebody is wanting to be promoted versus if somebody doesn't want to be promoted. It's going to look different. And in fact, even if somebody does want to get promoted, there are still things within their current role that they should be developing and working on, and probably need to be developing and working on. So what I want to change our perspective on, though, and again, I think I did a whole podcast episode about this too, because it's kind of a sticking point for me. Development and training should not be just for the things we're not good at. On that podcast episode, I told this little story about some, I think it's forest animals. And like, basically it was like, okay, well, the duck had to learn how to run and hunt or something like that. And it's completely like, no one would ever say a duck's going to be a good runner. And trying to develop someone's weaknesses is a little bit like that. So Don Clifton, who created Clifton Strengths, this is all like, Gallup is a huge supporter of this. So if you haven't done your Clifton Strengths, very valuable. I'm actually I did it a couple of years ago, and I'm learning about it from a colleague of mine, Heidi Kennedy. So I will leave her information in the show notes as well. But it's very powerful to understand these strengths. But I'm going to read this quote from Don Clifton from his book, Soar with Your Strengths. Weaknesses cannot be transformed into strengths. The goal, therefore, is to manage weaknesses so the strengths can be free to develop and become so powerful they make the weaknesses irrelevant. So think about that. All this time you're saying, okay, you're bad at this, so we're going to get you a training in it so that you can be better at it. There is a purpose to that, and that is if the weakness is getting in the way. So you could say somebody who's not good at planning their day out and really struggles to even like come up with an semblance of a plan. Okay, you can give them some help and support. But the key thing there is they're going to need the support to stick to it because it's obviously there's a reason it's hard for them. But making them and like berating, well, not berating. I'm not saying that people are berating, but putting an overemphasis on it and saying you're always going to have to, we're going to have you do projects where you have to plan things and you're going to project manage things now. It's not how they're going to get better. In fact, they're just going to get frustrated and want to leave. What would really be the benefit there, or the right thing to do would be to say, okay, let's get you some planning courses. We're going to give you a regular support structure. We'll talk about it. And we'll kind of keep that rhythm going until you feel comfortable with just a daily and weekly plan. So we're going to start there. And we just want you to get to this level, understanding that it's going to be a struggle and hard for you. But these are your strengths. Your geniuses are an invention. So what we actually want you to do is we want you to be part of this team in that creative fashion and lead these brainstorming sessions for the team. And we're going to put you in a program to kind of help you learn how to lead these brainstorming sessions and maybe facilitate them better so you can be an even better use of your invention. That would be a great development plan. So a little bit of something to help bring the weakness up, but something that's really going to take their strength and just soar it through the roof. And it's like 10 times, not even 100 times more beneficial, more return on investment to invest in someone's strength versus their weaknesses. So just do that. Okay. But with the geniuses, we should be looking at when we have somebody who's struggling with something. Look at their geniuses. Say, hey, is this thing in your frustrations, your competencies, or is it in your geniuses? If it's in your geniuses, then let's have a chat. What's going on? There might be something else. If it's in your frustrations or competencies, we can say, okay, I see this task is actually in your frustrations or competencies. What can we do? Can we offload it to somebody else? Like, does that work? Because sometimes it doesn't. And if not, what can we do? When you're operating in it, let's partner you with somebody who's going to just, hang out and bug you a couple times a day, or let me know as your leader and I will just come and check in on you. I will check in with you multiple times through that day or that week or whatever that time frame is, just to make sure that you're doing it. You don't need any help. Talk through the frustrating, let you vent for a minute. Like, just set these things up. And huge benefit because it gets the work done. B, it lets that person feel supported and shows empathy, creates empathy around the fact that this might be hard for them. And so we can use that for that development, and it's just amazing. And the last one that I want to talk about is feedback. So I've mentioned this before, but I've not done an entire podcast about it, but it's so hugely eye-opening. And it's a little bit similar to where I was getting to on the development part. But when we see that someone is struggling, like when we're giving that constructive feedback to somebody, if we know that it's outside of their geniuses, we can start with empathy. We can say, oh my gosh, this person turns everything in late. I am so frustrated with them right now. But if I go in frustrated, I'm going to be snippy. I'm going to be short with them. And I'm just going to say, just get your work done, right? I'm going to be annoyed. So if I can look at it from a different perspective and say, okay, this person turns everything in late. They also have a frustration and tenacity. So what might be happening here? And I talk about this most generous interpretation. I have talked about this before, and it's in my difficult conversation framework that's on my website. So if you go to my website resources, it's on there. And what we're doing there is we're trying to build empathy within ourselves so that we show up to the conversation better. So this most generous interpretation is basically saying, okay, what could have possibly gone on here? I see it's in their frustration. Okay, I get that. When I'm working my frustration, I don't want to do it either. I avoid it too. So I can empathize with that. The work still needs to get done. So this is the key here, is that something being in our frustration isn't an excuse for not getting it done. We still have to do it. So when you can show up to that conversation with the empathetic attitude of, okay, I can see this is hard for you. I see that. Let's brainstorm some ideas to make you more successful with it. Now we're showing up better. We're not frustrated and annoyed with them. So in some ways you're not tricking yourself, but you are changing your thoughts. We have control of our thoughts. So you're changing your thoughts to believe that there's a challenge and it's hard. So you know that it's hard. I still always say, come with curiosity. So that empathy should create the curiosity. Hey, I see this is in your frustration. I know it's hard. What are you thinking through this time? How is that going for you? What's that work look like for you? And so now you can start to have a conversation where they don't feel threatened. And that person feels like, oh, my leader's on my side, and we're going to come up with a solution. And that solution might look like that extra support that I mentioned in the last one, where, hey, we're going to do a check-in 3 times a day when you're doing this task. Because that's our jobs as leaders. Our jobs is to make sure that people have the tools and the ability and the motivation to do the work that they're set up to do, and to make sure it gets done, obviously. But that's our job. So checking in 3 times a day for like the 2 minutes that takes, that's an acceptable amount of time to do that. The other thing you can do is say, hey, well, when you're at this stage, you and so are going to work together now. Okay, that's acceptable too, because partnering with people, that happens. We need to do that. Again, we're meant to work together. So these are all, it just opens up that level of empathy and that really productive solutions that are actually going to work. Because the worst thing that happens after you have a feedback conversation is you come back, they agreed to some solution that they knew wouldn't work because in their mind, their mindset was stuck that I'm bad at this and I don't like doing it, or whatever that mindset was. But they didn't believe they could do it. They weren't supported properly to do it. And so the solution wasn't right. The solution wasn't good. So when we can make these feedback conversations, start off well with the empathy and the right curiosity, and B, have really good, productive, well thought out solutions, they're going to be better. People are going to be more successful. We will overall get better results, have a stronger team, work together better. Yay. We are winning, right? So this is what we want. So this is where I love this. Like when teams can embrace the working genius as part of their culture, as part of how they operate, it is amazing. I love it. It works better. It will get you better results. It will make the team happier. And it gives that language. And maybe I should have added this as number 5, but being able to name something, like there's science behind it, right? If you can name it, you can tame it. So being able to name something and say, I just get frustrated. This is frustrating work for me. And it's never going to not be frustrating for me. When I can name it, it's because it's tenacity work. It's frustrating. Now I can do something with it. I can solve that problem. So if you enjoyed today's episode, and if you are ready to just dive into the working genius, get super involved and just embrace it in your culture so you can start seeing the benefits in this, then I want you to reach out to me. I also want you to subscribe, leave a review, share it with your friends, because again, as I said at the beginning, I really want to share this with other people. And I really want people to embrace this in their workplace cultures, in their home cultures, their organization, volunteer cultures, whatever it is, because when we can be in cultures that are empowering, where we feel safe to say, hey, this is hard, when we feel safe to say, I need help, where we feel safe to say, I have a good idea. I might be at the bottom of the totem pole, but I have a good idea. And look at my genius says that I'm going to have good ideas. It's like when we can say that with confidence, we're going to just be better at home. We're going to be better in life. We're going to feel better about ourselves. We're going to have more confidence. And the most important part, we're going to be doing what we were put on this earth to do. We're going to do God's will. And that is what I want for all of you. And so, yeah, that is what I want. That's my Christmas wish for all of you. So if you enjoyed the episode, please like it, subscribe, share with a friend, leave me a comment on the YouTube video. And I hope you have an absolutely fantastic Christmas. Take some time with your family, have some healthy conflict. Listen to a couple episodes ago for that. And just really have a blessed Advent season and a blessed Christmas season. I will see you all in the new year, and definitely I will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit ChristinaSchmidt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.